Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Regal Live. Regal Live is a weekly series that aims to enable coaches to build a prosperous coaching business by becoming the best coaches that they can be. Regal Unlimited is a leadership development company that has over a decade of excellence in disrupting leadership development through coaching and coach training. In this edition of the Regal Live series, we have Subramani with us, Money as we call him. He's a transformation and growth coach with 25 years of experience in various things consulting, facilitation, and professional coaching. Beyond coaching, he's a voracious reader and a perpetual thinker, delving into various realms such as leadership, culture, TA, NLP. The list is very long here. And his constant endeavor is to live his coaching model, which revolves around aspire, act, and accept. Welcome, Money.
Thanks so much, Meena. Thanks for the intro and glad to be here.
Yeah. So this week we're going to be talking about resilience in coaching. And Mani, you've been a coach for a long time. You've earned a couple of credentials, ACC, PCC, and the journey is still going. So what does resilience mean to you as a coach?
Yeah, so when we talk about resilience, normally, Meena, we talk about the capacity to recover, right, in some way. And people say bouncing back. Uh, and I've often thought about, bouncing back doesn't make too much sense because we have moved ahead in time. And, when we face a challenge and we are down because of some reason, it's not that we can go back to that same time. So for me, resilience means, more in sense of recovering. Recovery could be fast or it could be slow. But I love the definition, from Donella Meadows, who talks about it in systemic aspect, and she says it's the ability for a system to survive and to persist. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So resilience is more about are you able to come back to a stage where you can increase your chances of survival and persistence in your journey. And I think in the coaching journey or in the coach training journey, which I have been as a learner and as a coach, I think that has stood well for me. So, ability to persist and to survive the ups and downs which come in. How do you see that?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I like that you've brought in that systemic element into resilience. And I want to go back to something you said, about you've been both a learner and now you're a practicing coach. Um, how does resilience flex when you're in these two phases? How is it different? How is it similar?
I think there are a lot of similarities and obviously some differences. So when you are in journey as a learner, you are aiming to reach somewhere, in terms of your credential, in terms of your assignments, and there are phases when you may feel that the learning curve is either looks a little steep or that you're not able to cope up with it. There could be times when the journey looks long, right, and then you're wondering that did you make the right choice, should you continue, should you not. I think these are the kind of difficult times for a learner coach, and if they have a strong why, it's easier to persist, which is where I think resilience also connects in a lot of in terms of what is the purpose which you're moving with. um, but I also feel one critical thing which comes in as a learner is handling feedback. So when you are learning and you get feedback from your mentors or from others, how do you still continue working towards betterment? I think that's these are a couple of things which come in. So as a learner, you are trying towards a destination. As a coach, I think that destination necessarily doesn't remain, because now you have become credential coach, you're working towards your own betterment. I think that comes into play more. So the focus shifts to own well-being. When you have a coaching session, you're working with a client, you are working with emotions, and that sometimes they could be strong emotions. So how do you keep yourself in that state of well-being and obviously continue learning? So I think that's kind of two different spaces we look at.
That's amazing. And you're very right about feedback. That is a hard one, especially in the learning phase.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you do everything and then you still get feedback, it's important to take it on board, but it's also difficult. And I think being kind to yourself and reframing it is important. That's a great point. So, what do you do, Money, to keep yourself resilient?
So I think one of the things which has really worked well for me is the practice of journaling. While I'm not too much into meditation or other things, but I think journaling has helped me become mindful. So I when I look back and see what is it that worked for me, what didn't work for me, and when I write about it, uh, that's something which really helps me move forward, to analyze it and to see what can be done more. Another thing is, I think this habit of continuously trying to learn from the experience which has happened, and staying on course and not seeing it as a very short term journey, but looking at it as something which is, the aspire part of it. So if you have an aspiration which is well defined and which is pushed by a purpose, I think that helps me stay. How has it been for you? I mean, you have also been in a coaching journey and now a coach.
Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of aspects in the when you were previously talking about the phases. I do journal. I like journaling, but I think for me, the other ways in which I think resilience is something that needs to be nurtured because I
Yeah.
experience it as sometimes dipping and peaking. And for me, I think being outdoor is a very big part of developing that. When I go for my walks or, fresh air, I find it automatically clears my head, especially if I'm thinking about something deeply. But
Yeah.
apart from that, while practicing as a coach, one thing that's helped me is supervision and community,
Hmm.
both of these. I think we're very lucky to be part of a big community of coaches. And I, even if you're not being actively coached, just talking to somebody about something you're experiencing, or if you've had a bad day, um,
Absolutely. Yep. And
yeah.
I would say this is not only for us as practicing coaches, but even more important for learner coaches, especially people who, fall off the track or for some reason or other stop communicating, responding, they don't stay on
Mhm.
track. I think the community is a big support. So when we talk about resilience, it's not that you need to do all the hard work to come back. You can always ask for help. And I think
Mm.
that's one important thing which, if people are aware of, it'll be easier for them to, not go out of that, as you say, radar.
Yeah, yeah. And the nice thing about community is it can also be organic. It doesn't have to
Yep.
be well defined. You can always find your tribe uh, amongst the practicing coaches. But having somebody to talk to, I've found, is extremely important in staying on course and
Yes.
staying on the journey. So, yeah.
And the thing you talked about supervision, so in a sense, even when you do peer coaching in early stages when you are still learning, I think that itself is a big thing, because you have a ecosystem which is learning along with you, and there's something which you're part of the same journey in a way. You're all stumbling and learning and going together. I think that sense of learning together is very strong support for you.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Um, I just want to briefly go back to supervision. I was sharing with somebody because I often find it very hard to articulate the benefit of very powerful things, So, but what I have found is that it has helped me become a lot freer in my way of coaching, like
Yeah.
um, especially with the emotions part, right? Like there's a lot that happens in a coaching conversation. And then having that space to go and talk to somebody about that
Hmm.
has been immensely helpful. And I think for me, resilience in that sense is not giving up. If you're noticing a pattern or if something
Absolutely.
difficult has
Yeah.
come up,
Yeah.
and making sense of it, right? And then coming back and being able to uh, join back into the coaching community as a full coach, like uh, it's very restorative is the word I'd like to use. So yeah.
Yeah, and a wonderful metaphor I read about Meena in this case is like a bamboo, right? And someone
Yeah,
described it as saying it bends but doesn't break.
true.
So I love that kind of metaphor, and it actually describes what being resilient could mean. That you
Hmm.
don't get overwhelmed, where you're able to experience that. It's not that you dismiss it, but you come back, or
Hmm.
you're facing difficulty in your journey or to adapting to change, but you seek help and you come out of it. I think that kind of sense really makes for a big support for resilience. I would say people how they need to develop their resilience, how they need to identify resilience. I think these are
Hmm.
a couple of things they can look at.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Mani, I had a question for you. There are a lot of you also train other coaches. You mentor. So, what advice would you give based on what you've seen to people? When they feel that their resilience is being depleted, what would you say to them?
I think one of the if you look at the competency framework, one of the things we look at coaching mindset. The second competency talks a lot about resilience. I would say because you have pointers there which says how you can focus on self, right? How do you manage self? How do you take care of ongoing reflective practice? It also talks about in some way I think ongoing learning practices, right? It says what is your ability to regulate emotions. I think all of this in some way different practices can be used, like you talked about going outdoors. I do journaling, someone else uses meditation as one of the ways, right? I think ultimately it all comes down to how do you take care of yourself. So when we talk about the key concept or the key underlying in resilience is self care for me. And when people talk about self care, they often confuse it with selfishness. But I would say self care is putting yourself first and not putting yourself only. So that's kind of a difference. So that for me would be self care is the biggest thing. You figure out ways to take care of yourself, and it builds your resilience.
Hmm. Hmm. And Rekha has asked a question: how is resilience different from maintaining balance?
Yeah. So when we are talking about balance, I would say actually they both go hand in hand, right? You are in a state, let's say you are faced with a difficult situation, and it might bother you for a while. But if you are in a state of balance, if you have developed that capability and that muscle, it helps you come to a state where you can continue onwards. You may not continue from the same place where you went down, but you come to a place from where you can move ahead. So that's where we talked about, the ability to survive and to move ahead.
Hmm. That's a very good way of describing it. And when I think of balance, I think this is one of those words that has both like a static and dynamic element to it.
Yeah.
You need to do a lot to stay in balance, but the balance itself seems like stillness. But there's effort to keep that going. So yeah, yeah, I
Yeah, in
can.
fact, I will also add a pointer when we talk about balance. What are we really trying to balance in terms of resilience, right? It's not about that you're suppressing your emotions. So we're not saying resilience is about not handling your emotions or pushing them off. We're saying that you may go down, and it's fine, it's natural for you to get affected. But how do you develop that capability so that you can work on that and come back to a state where you can move forward? So it's not a pessimistic or defeatist kind of a tendency, or so you're not looking at one or other. So in that sense I feel it's more of a balance where I'm okay. It's like a bouncing ball. It will go down but it can come up.
Hmm. Hmm. When you were talking about that, there's another question that came to me, Mani. You're a learner, quite a voracious reader. So, how does learning keep you resilient?
Hmm. I think when you learn new things, for me what I've experienced is I also learn what possibly is not needed anymore. So that, I somewhere I'm relating now to what Rekha talked about balance a while back. uh, Knowing what is not serving you anymore and understanding what new needs to be added which can serve. I
Mm.
think that's the part of balance, and that's what comes from learning, continuous learning. So when you realize, even some of the beliefs, your values, knowledge, a lot of it may need to be upgraded, changed, discarded at times, and relearned. I think that part keeps you moving ahead. There are areas where you may feel that you have come to a standstill, but when you learn new things, you may find another way to move ahead and to thrive.
Mm. Mm. So it's the learning and the unlearning. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so Rekha has asked another question. Somehow the tone of resilience seems to be about handling a problem. Do you need to be resilient only when you're going down?
No, so when we talked about the definition, it's not necessarily going down, So when we talk about surviving in a system which is dynamic, that's also resilience, right? So it's not necessarily going down, but it's also about changing. So system which is variable around you, how do you survive and move ahead? So I'm using this word survive again and again because it's very fundamental. It talks about something which helps you stay there and you persist with moving ahead. So it could be that environment is changing and you find another way to move ahead. That is also possible. It's not always about that you are in a situation which takes you down.
Hmm. Hmm. Or not get too carried away when,
Not to get carried away, not get, yeah, absolutely.
with success and good things coming your way, right? So, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. That's great. So we have a couple of minutes more, Money. Are there any last parting words that you want to leave us with? Um,
Yeah, so I see this comment from Subhash saying not just survive and thrive, and I agree with that. Yeah, so survival is very basic, but when you persist, you start thriving, you're moving ahead. Uh, so I would say, when we talk about individuals, we are all part of systems, and we are not alone in this journey. So in a way, if we use the system, if we are part of that, a community, that's one of the key things to help us survive and to thrive both ways. uh, Another thing is that we have the ability to leverage this community, and that's something which each learner and each coach can take to heart, and use that to the best of their abilities.
yeah, that's a great point. Use community and keep in mind that really thrive, stay resilient and thrive. Right. So yeah,
Yep.
great. Okay. I think that brings us almost to the end of what we were discussing. And
Rekha has put another comment, I guess. Learning and unlearning seem to indicate that resilience is related to growth. Yeah, so we've been talking about survival and growth. I think both of them. Yeah,
hmm, seems like a good idea then to keep connected to your system.
absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes. And there's an interconnectedness to that as well, right? So, yeah,
yeah.
great. Okay. All right. I think that's all we have. If anybody has any more questions, I think we have about a minute.
So I can remember something, Meena, as I was just reading this comments. There was a webinar I saw from Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was part of Tamil Nadu tsunami, disaster
Mm,
handling, and he talked about resilience in a very different way. He said that you have to upgrade and change parallelly. You do not get any pit stops when you
mm,
want to be resilient. And I just recalled that when he talked about that, and he said that it's an ongoing process. You keep upgrading
mm.
even when you're going through all this variable environment. So I think that's something interesting and could be used.
Yeah, you never arrive, right? You can't stop. It's a constant
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. That's a good thought. Um, 30 seconds more. Any more questions?
I think one thing I would want to tell all the coaches and learners who are watching this: use the community to the fullest, because that's available to you, and that's one of the avenues where you can reach out without hesitation. And it's like what Dumbledore says, that help is available for anyone who asks for it.
Yeah, lovely thought. That's great. So, with that, I think we've just finished our Regal Life for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And keep in mind that community is always around, and make sure that you reach out and stay resilient. Thank you.
Thank you, Meena. Thanks for the wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Mani.